Welcome, everyone. This is Pilot Needles, and you're listening to LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at latest news in LOTRO and here at LOTRO Players. And tonight, I am joined by Krister.
Hello.
Hello there, Krister. Are you ready to have a look at what was in this week's beta?
I am both excited and horrified.
Horrified?
Well, the Mariners. I'm comfortable with the Mariner as a class, but the idea of them singing shanties all the time is starting to really kind of gnaw at the edges. So I might just have to take a trip to Shantytown.
Okay. Let's have a look in there. And of course, they were making some tweaks to the Mariner this week, and that skills are no longer going to require the player to have a dagger equipped in the offhand weapon slot. This should resolve the issues where improperly acting daggers, because apparently some daggers just refuse to cooperate and actually tell the game that they were daggers. So as a result, sometimes you have a dagger in your left hand and the game wouldn't recognize it being there.
I'm going to stab you with my dagger. I'm not a dagger. I'm a spork. Wait, what? What?
Yes. So the theme of the Mariners combat is that you have a parrying dagger in your offhand, but they were overridable with cosmetic outfits with non-daggers anyway, so they're loosening up the requirement that should reduce the confusion to players. You should still need to have a weapon equipped to both hands, and will only be able to choose one-handed sword for your legendary weapon. So those are the two things to note, that you're only going to get one, is that you are going to have a one-handed sword as your legendary weapon, and that you must have weapons equipped in both hands. So they're going to, of course, continue to have that rule, but they're not going to enforce what type of weapon you have in your offhand from the point of view of deciding whether or not you could use a skill. And now you should be able to move the balance UI, which that was a little problem that they had in there. They couldn't move the UI on that manner, so that's all fine. They were making some tweaks to how the cooldowns were working and the damage. For example, they increased the Mariner skill damage and dots damage, so the Mariner is now a little bit stronger than it was in the previous build. And let's see, I think most of the other things I'm not going to worry too much about, because this is something new, so we're expecting all sorts of tweaks in there.
Right.
Now, let's go then into the other changes that we have in here, and buff interactions. And this is one that you're not going to like, probably.
No. I think you're going to say what we found out on Friday, which was that the Mariners like bonuses and the captain's bonuses cannot stack.
Yeah, that is what I'm going to say, is that Oathbreaker Shame, which of course is something that's currently on live, the breaking of Thongorodrim, which is a Mariner bonus that has similar effects to the Oathbreaker Shame, and Murder Crows, which is something that's gaining a bonus similar to those other two.
Okay, so now the thought, however, the redemption here for this would be that a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, captains, we couldn't stack our Oathbreakers, but one captain could hit their Oathies right at the end of that. The next captain could hit their Oathbreakers, and they could chain them. Now we can't. We can't chain them any longer. So maybe what we're going to have here is that we can't stack them. However, the Mariner can fill the gap that other captain could, where we can have them be chained off of each other.
When you say chained, what happens? What do you mean? They all wind up sharing the cooldown or something?
Well, no. Yeah. It's basically that the cooldown for the Oathbreakers is no other. If Oathbreakers has been cast, no other captain can cast Oathbreakers for a set amount of time. And so that used to be different. And so that's what would happen is if you had to Cappies, and they're traded with Oathbreakers, you just hit one right after the other, and there you have this extended super damage period. So maybe what the Mariner will be able to fill that gap where you hit Oathies. Once Oathies subsides, the Mariner's DPS skill goes off, and you basically can continue that way. So that would be cool. So
do you realize the devs are probably taking notes and saying, okay, now we got to fill in that, take care of that hole?
Well, I'm almost feeling like, since they were conscientious of the fact that they changed it, so the captains couldn't
wait till
do it.
I read this next line.
Okay.
The Oath's fulfilled effect has been renamed to Renewed Defenses and will prevent another potent debuff from being applied for 45 seconds.
Okay, and that's very generic, potent debuff. So
okay, so how long was the Oathbreaker shame preventing anyone from doing it?
That's the thing I cannot remember, because we just stopped doing it. So
okay. I can't what's the cooldown on Oathbreaker shame?
I can't remember now. It's been so long. I've been mainly playing my tank for a couple of years now.
Okay.
Like 5 minutes, maybe.
With 5 minutes is not bad because it looks like the new debuff that's put on there is 45 seconds. So that means is that once we're going to say that once Oathbreakers expires, then that for the next 45 seconds you can't put on Murder of Crows or Breaking of Thangorodrim or Oathbreaker Shame, most likely.
Right.
So 45 seconds then sounds like a more reasonable one than 5 minutes.
And that's not too. Yeah, I was going to say that's not too bad. Honestly, 45 seconds isn't that bad.
Okay.
But that could be a significant part of the battle too. So.
Well, it depends on what we're fighting. Yes. Caustic Brew, Ancient Craft, and Trickster each apply Major Rent armor and will not stack with one another. Okay, so that's okay. And Caustic Brew, that is something that's put out by Mariners. Ancient Craft, that is something that is put out by Lore Masters. And Trickster, that sounds like something that's put out by Burglars.
Yeah, Burglar.
Okay. Pitch Pot and Sticky Tar each apply minor rent armor and will not stack with one another. All right. So in other words, each of these items then have new debuffs that are on there to prevent them from stacking. All right.
Right.
For the Burglar, Trickster tricks now apply major rent armor, reducing all enemy mitigations by 10% for 20 seconds. All right. And Location is Everything now increases critical chain skills damage rather than causing those skills to ignore some enemy mitigations. Now for Champions Advantage now increases the blade skills damage rather than causing those skills to ignore some enemy mitigations. Damage from Champion blade skills has been increased by 8%, and damage for Champion strike skills has been increased by 20%. For Guardians, damage for most Guardian skills has been reduced by 5%. Rupture has...
They couldn't afford 5%.
Rupture has been corrected to a 10-second duration at slightly increased potency, and Hammer Down has a second hit again. All right. Hunters. Bodkin arrows now increased induction skill damage rather than causing hunter skills to ignore some enemy mitigations, and damage for most hunter skills has been increased by 15%. For Lore Masters, Murder Crow's debuff is now 10% mischance, but 20% incoming damage, and does not stack with Oathbreakers or Breaking of Thangorodrim. So therefore, they're reducing the mischance on the Murder Crows, but they are giving it an Oathie similar thing. So that means if you've got a Lore Master or a mariner in your party, then you could do something similar to Oathie. So does that mean that you'd have Lore Master saying, okay, murder coming up in 5 seconds?
Yeah, wow. That's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, especially since you said that you haven't been doing Red Captain too much recently, so...
Yeah. Yeah, get that lore master to work.
Yes, get that Lore Master to work, yes. Ancient Craft now removes 5% of all enemy mitigations rather than armor rating. Enfeeble will increase this amount to 15% for 10 seconds and 10% thereafter. And when Enfeeble is traded, Ancient Craft has the correct priority level, so it will override weaker forms of Greater Rent armor. For the Forester event, all movement bonuses are now suspended as they should be. The sinking issue with the event should now be solved. We have made all the Forester tools that can be made and upgraded as part of the event account bound. The Forester event will now run, regardless of participants, every 21 minutes. We'll talk more about this later. The quest for Forester event will no longer invoke the Mithril coin reset on failure or canceling. There was an odd race condition in the quest that could cause the quest to fail in a second step. This has been rectified, and Guardians were able to bypass the speed restrictions in the Forester event with Sprint. This has been remedied. So they had several fixes to the Forester's event. And I think they made 1 or 2 tweaks after this because I think there were 3 builds this week that they had. And I think the second and third builds were mostly for tweaks on the Forester event. For miscellaneous items, several avatar clothing models that had missing textures and were displaying as white are now fixed. Warsteed combat fidgets are now correctly played only in combat. The Warsteed only plays fidgets in combat. I mean, I would think that you wouldn't want your Warsteed to be fidgeting in combat.
No, that's interesting. Okay. Because what's been happening is when I've been on my Warsteed, it has been fidgeting all the time. Like, I think if you had, like, your mood was, like, angry or something, I can't remember what mood it was, but if your mood was set a certain way. Oh, it was if you were smoking. If you're on your horse and you were smoking, it would get agitated. But yeah, I noticed that. So good. Yeah, it's been frustrating being on the anxiety-ridden horse.
All right. Level 130 shrews should no longer be able to sneak into the instance Humble Beginnings. No, you don't want level 130 shrews in a level 1 instance.
No.
Sarabeth Lowbanks have found her name again. And Sagroth flutes now use flute entities. And that's it for the patch notes for this week. And I'm sure that there will be another build next week where we could maybe have a few more peeks into what's coming up for the Mariner, because I noticed they do not yet have the Mariner class quest up. Now, I don't know if that's something where they want to withhold that until the release in order to avoid spoilers, or if it's a matter of they just didn't have it ready for this build yet. Maybe next week we'll find out. So then, let's take a look about what's going on with the Combe Forester event, because we did say that they made some tweaks to it in this Bulwer. So, what went wrong? Well, normally to handle an event of this manner that I wanted to work, we needed to put the event into an instant space to ensure that the game's event system could handle a variety of race conditions and ensure the stability of the event remained encapsulated in a closed environment. They thought that they had solved that issue that normally causes this to occur with a number of verification steps along the way with that was, alas, when put onto the game world, where a land block layer does not maintain the sanctity of the states of the logic machines handling the events, the event began to desync. Oops. So, how this happened? Well, two ways. Well, first, there were a number of relays used to handle the event status that, when triggered on one game layer, did not communicate back to the previous layer, and thus, if a land block layered, the event suffered a crippling and catastrophic failure. Okay. I can see, because you announce that you are having this event, and people rush over to the site, and this creates dynamic layers, and then you have all this going on at the same time in different layers, and it's breaking the thing. At least that's how I'm interpreting what he means by this. And second, and more likely, there was a race condition introduced in the initial fix that caused the transition step from players interacting with the NPC to advance the event that tracked the number of contestants with the event that tracked the cooldown, and led to cases where a player would sign up and auto fail because the quest objective would see the event status in the failure state indicated of the advanced state. So, in other words,
the fix was in.
Yeah. So so there was what they were trying to do is they were trying to have it so that they could have this as well. Actually, he talks about this more. So therefore, let me use Orion's words. All right. So why did this happen? Again, to be honest, equal parts of stubbornness on my part and our controlled environment and even Bulwer servers do not see the same load that the live servers do. This resulted in us believing that the fix that we put in was valid and that the issue would not appear. We were wrong, and the event went pear-shaped very quickly. I wanted the event to be a couple of things when I was in the initial development stages. First, I wanted the event to be public, so anyone who wanted to could see the participants and cheering their fellows on. Second, I want the event to be player driven and on demand rather than in a set rotating timer that just played regardless of whether or not the players were present. Sadly, the second was a bridge too far in our event system, which, as I read in the release notes, that's the part that they undid, is that now it is on a set timer, which means the event's going to run whether or not there are players there to actually run in the event.
Right.
And that's an annoyance that they have in some of the items there, but this just demonstrated on why they do it, is because anything else seems to break things. Yes. So, what did you do to fix it? Well, I needed to move away from the player agency aspect of the event and move it to a set schedule. As it stands, it will be on a timer that has a 15-minute cooldown during which players are locked out from getting the quest or participating in any of the event festivities. There is now a built-in timer that runs independent of player interaction that waits for 6 minutes and then locks the event behind the cooldown. Players still receive the alerts when the event begins recruiting and have 6 minutes to arrive at the Combe Lumber Camp to get the quest and to register to compete. After that 6 minutes transpires, the ability to obtain the quest for the event expires, and any player who has the quest but has not registered with the judges audit will fail the quest. In other words, you need to register. First you need to get the quest, and then you need to register for the event. So that's a two-step process there. So, yes. Well, the failures are necessary. However, failing the quest will no longer trigger the daily cooldown. Rather, any failure will cause you to wait 5 minutes before you can take the quest again. The same is true if you decide to cancel the quest. Canceling will no longer invoke the daily cooldown, only invoking a short 5-minute wait before you can take it again. Competing in the quest will still invoke the daily cooldown. We discovered that there were a handful of speed buffs that also slipped through the suppression. These have been remedied from coffee to wanderlust to the new mariner speed enhancing skills. And apparently also the guardian thing, since that's what I read in the release notes. We have also been monitoring your feedback on the new tools, and after some rumination, we made the decision to bind these items to the account instead of crafting the character, which we already mentioned there earlier. So, the summary is the contest now consistently occurs every 21 minutes, 6 minutes recruiting window, and 15 minutes cooldown. Quest available only while recruiting. Failure and canceling the quest no longer invokes the daily quest cooldown. All speed enhancements are now successfully suppressed. And if they missed one, well, we hope that they find them on Bulwer before they get to the live worlds. And crafted Forester axes available in the event are now bound to account, not the character. So we'll see how that works. They've done a bit of testing of this on Bulwer. So I don't know whether this stuff is coming out with update 38 or if this stuff is going to be out in a actually not 30 in actually 37.2. Was it going to be 37.2 when they're going to release this, or if there's going to be a 37.1.3 that will include this? I guess we'll find that out soon enough.
Well, and I'd just like to say, if they're going to switch the coffee to decaf, taking away our coffee, I could imagine a war much more horrible than anything that's happened for the ring.
It's only going to be decaf at the Combe Lumber Camp.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, yeah, yes. Yeah, so they serve only decaf at Combe. Yes, the coffee in the rest of the world will be should be fine. Yes. Now, we also have an article here about the crafting updates that are arriving with the Corsairs of Umbar. When the Lord of the Rings Online launched the vocation system years ago, it was meant to inspire social dynamicism. By restricting intermediate ingredients to certain professions not available to other vocation groups, we hope that the players would trade socially and use systems like the auction house to exchange ingredients. In practice, players often created additional characters instead, or just avoided the crafting system entirely. As we approached level 105, we instituted longer and more difficult advancement paths for crafting meant to keep crafters working towards their cap for an extended period of time. We added additional tiers since then, but these additionals highlighted the frustrations these longer advancement paths caused. We've taken a look at crafting to identify the most impactful changes we can accomplish within the scope and timing of our wider development efforts, and the results are outlined below. First off, no more tier restrictions. With the release of Corsairs of Umbar, crafters will be able to execute and learn any recipes available from the Umbar profession trainers without having their previous complete intervening tiers. No more slogging through earlier tiers to get to the nearest tier of crafting. Huzzah? Over time, we intend to move backwards through the game, removing earlier tier requirements. Those earlier crafting tiers will logically tie into the expansions where the initial crafting tier released. This does not mean you'll need the corresponding expansion to interact with these crafting tiers. It means that the tier will be logically tied to the expansion where it was released and likely named accordingly. Okay. I think that sentence does not mean you'll need the corresponding expansion to interact with the crafting tiers. I think they added that one in there because a lot of people interpreted this to mean that.
Right.
And so that sentence was added after the first time I had read this. Okay, so that means then, for now, of course, the whole thing of not being tied to the tier is only going to be for the Umbar level. But they hope to backtrack on later ones in later updates, probably depending on their priorities and all that usual stuff. 2. No more vocations. The goals that we had for vocations are largely obsolete these days, and we think the vocations and tier requirements negatively impact the auction house economy. Yeah, well, seeing that we've had 10 years of very bad economy on the auction house, and I guess, yeah, I guess that's true. Players with multiple characters and years of work can corner the market for lower tier ingredients, which has the effect of driving newer players out of the crafting system. If you are currently a crafter with vocations on of any tier, the only change is the removal of the vocations. Your professions and tiers remaining untouched. If you've never engaged in our crafting system, you can now choose up to 3 professions of your choice when visiting a Master of Apprentices. If you have 3 professions selected and want to replace one with a different profession, you can simply remove the old profession and start a new one. Advancement in a profession that you remove will be permanently lost. We also want to let people pick a 4th profession, likely through an expenditure of mithril, although we do not know when this work will be done. It's not going to be done for the initial release. Actually, they say although we do not know when this will be ready. Yeah, they don't know when it'll be ready for release, so I suspect that'll be several months, probably sometime next
Yeah.
year, before that's going to happen. Because once again, that 4th profession is not high on the priority list, especially in light of all the stuff with the expansion coming up.
But I honestly like that idea, so I'm looking forward to that because it gives you just a since they're doing all the changes, that gives you a little more flexibility with your existing crafters. So.
Now, this explains why there's a quest in Plangaran where you're asked to talk to the crafters there, and when you talk to the crafters there, the next step of it is to do 3 of the quests. So with the craft quests that are there, because you have the starter one for each of them, and so you're asked to do 3 of them. And I think now I know why they tied that to doing 3 of those 7 quests rather than to a vocation, is because that's so we all nice and ready for this new system.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, gathering and trading. Oh, tracking. We are excited to share changes in the tracking and gathering system. These changes do not require an expansion purchase and will simply happen when Update 38 arrives. Most importantly, you will be able to track more than one resource node at a time.
Ooh, that's very cool.
If you have only one of these skills, you will only see the skill for that specific gathering profession. The moment you train a second gathering profession, your skill will change to track resources, and you will begin tracking all nodes that you can see through your trained professions. Once you train a gathering profession, you will be able to harvest any node of that type regardless of tier. Gathering ore, wood, and relics is something that you just understand, so specialization and advancement are instead focused on refinement of the materials that you collect. This means that you can harvest and collect any node that you can find through traveling. If you can track the resource, then you are able to gather the resource. And that helps me with some of the frustrations I have in it. Like, for example, I had not quite finished Master Tier when my group got into Moria. And so now I see all of these ore nodes that I suddenly can't mine because I am still 100 XP away from getting to the next tier. So I had to skip all those until I went back into Eregion, got the materials in order at least to get to the first level of the mastery thing, and then I was able to go back in and start gathering the materials that I needed. And also on top end crafting, For a while now, we have been listening to your feedback that newly released crafting tiers were not as appealing as you would like, and crafting gear was lagging behind rewards coming from quests and other sources. Top end crafters tell us that they feel required to engage in in game experiences that do not suit their playstyles. We want you to play as you like. This is because a lot apparently a lot of the materials you needed in order to craft anything serious required ingredients that dropped from high-end instances. Since I didn't have any characters that qualified for that, since all my top-end crafters were yeomen, and instead we had to worry about fishing in order to get our top-end thing. So we plan to expand the places where crafters need to get materials to make top-end gear and items. This may include things like guild-based daily and weekly quests, landscape quest rewards, accomplishment rewards, vendor purchases, and missions. We will maintain drops in raids, featured instance delvings, and other game content so that we don't exclude any method someone may use in order to get recipes or items that they want. Now, next, evergreen resources. We are designing upgradable items that use a new evergreen resource to create enhancement versions of these items. These new resources are called Luckstone settings, and it recently debuted in the Update 37 as part of the Comb Forester event, or at least they will as soon as they get the Comb Forester event working. We'll have more information about these upgradable items in the future, but Luckstone settings are stored in your wallet, unlike other crafting materials, and they are intended to have a limited ability to stack in your account to ensure that the usage and flow of upgrading items with them remains fluid long term. Obtaining a Luckstone setting requires effort, but it also has multiple ways to get it. You'll get Luckstone settings from crafting events such as the Comb Forester event, and as we add events to other professions, you'll get them there as well. Guild trade with Umbar and traditional guilds. These Corsairs of Umbar is released, only Umbar guilds will offer them, but there will be a set of story quests that bring fabrication of these settings to other guilds throughout previous crafting tiers, regions, and areas of the game. Of story quests, so what? We are to bring these materials to the other guilds or something? Barter and rare drop rewards in featured instances and delvings, and accomplishments like allegiances and factions. General resources and advancement. We intend advancement along Umbar tiers to be slower than traditional crafting to represent learning the new techniques of a foreign region, because we are no longer in familiar spaces. We are off, we are well south of Gondor in there, so I guess we don't have as much communications with the people of Umbar as we have with the people in Eriador and Gondor and Rovanian. We also intend to expand this crafting tier as we tell the story of Umbar and complete the epic story in this region. We hope to establish a new paradigm in which we can operate and expand crafting inside the game consistently for years to come. This means the amount of basic materials needed to complete many recipes will be increasing to ensure a healthy economy. It is possible that in the future we may permit players to convert upper tier raw materials downward to help get through the earlier tiers, although no formal decision has been made on this idea yet. I'm sure a lot of people would be happy if they did.
Right.
Yes, oh yes, Liz, I have all this gold, but I can't find copper to save my life. I think there have been times when I think it was more expensive to buy copper in the auction house than it was to buy gold, because that's how bad.
Oh heck yeah, yeah. That's where people would nail you. It wasn't the high end stuff or the low end stuff. It was the kind of the middle tier stuff that was, because who's doing that anymore? Who are in those zones? Anymore. So.
Right. We are separating crafting guilds in Umbar since the new crafting tier no longer requires previous tiers of advancement. You will join the craft guilds of Umbar separately, and they have their own advancement path. Traditional guilds remain relevant since you'll use some of your crafting materials in the Umbar crafting guild to advance your traditional crafting guild as well. We also intend to bring back missions, quests, and instances created solely for crafters to help them advance with their craft guilds of Umbar. Some of these will arrive after the initial release of the expansion, and development will continue as we move along in the future. So I guess that means we're going to get some resource instances. See, when is the last time we got a resource instance? Because I know that they had some with the
Oh my
writers of
goodness.
Rohan.
No, it was. Oh, come on, Chris. It was after Rohan. It was.
There was one
Was it?
after Rohan.
Wasn't. I mean, didn't Gondor have? Didn't we do? Didn't we have resource?
I can't remember. I guess maybe because I never got a crafter that high that was
Yeah, because I seem to
that type.
recall in the main hall there you could do the because that was when they introduced missions in general. But I thought you could do like crafting stuff with that one too. But
Okay,
yeah, I
yeah,
wasn't
I
doing
don't
that too
remember
much at
them.
that point.
Okay, see, I don't. The last one I remember was the one for Writers of Rohan because I remember those because I remember the lumber camp quest that was in there where you went on to these. That's right, you had to unlock those resource instances in Hootbold. They had to do Hootbold in order to do those. And
Yep.
also, so, but in conclusion, we want crafting to return to a more relevant and exciting place with Corsairs of Umbar, and we are excited about these changes. Crafters will be able to make some best in slot items if they dedicate time and resources to the effort. And we can't wait for you to see and experience the future of crafting in the Lord of the Rings Online.
Well, I admit I'm interested, and I think it was funny how they were talking about how their plans for the economy were defeated by people just rolling up other tunes to be their crafters, because that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what
Yeah,
happened.
it was like, why am I going to pay for food on the auction house? I'm just going to get a farmer and start making my own food.
Yeah, that's what happened. And for those cases of where where people did use the auction house, we had people who giving some rather, let's just say, high prices in the auction house, especially at certain tiers. Ah, yes, the joys of. I mean, yes. Oh, yes. This piece of copper will cost you 100 gold. Ah, the joys of crafting.
But the market bore it, so somebody paid for it, you know?
Yes. Now, also something that we had this week is the first of the casual strolls through Middle Earth, going through the Corsairs of Umbar content. There are going to be a total of 4 of these over the course of this week plus the next 3 weeks after this, where this week we went through the western part of King's Gondor, which is the first of the new areas in there. So we're able to see Dol Amroth, and all those other towns that are in that area and see what they're like now that the war's over. So we'll be able to see the places that were under the shadow of the dawnless day. We're of course now are going to be at full daylight, at least during the daytime.
Well, hopefully it's like pleasant, but it's not like the Ewoks singing in the village type of activity, because I'm just not going to be able to stand it.
Well, I don't think it's going to be Ewoks singing in the village or anything
Okay.
like this. And they are going to have these pockets of stragglers that are, of course, are going to be there because when all the armies pulled out, there were inevitably some camps that were missed and the stragglers that are there, and they're trying to figure out how to cope. I suspect that some of them are just going to, by force of habits, continue raiding and stuff like that, or they turn brigand, in which case it's just as bad as if they were still army enemies. And then you may have some who might have quests on finding, because I think there was a, like in Eastern King's Gondor, there was a case where we had to deal with that, where there was someone who wanted to make amends and stuff like that. So some of them who say, okay, the war's over, maybe I could make peace with the locals and either settle here or find a way home or something like that. There'll probably be different things. Who knows what all is going to happen. But we are going to run into pockets of Corsairs and probably Haradrim, stuff like that, as we go through the area. And we could also see what's going on because on the Paths of the Dead, well, I don't think we can go into the Paths of the Dead. I think they're closed now, but I know that when he was doing his thing in there, I saw a number of Oathbreakers standing there. So I don't know whether those Oathbreakers are well, I don't think they're ones that fulfill their oaths, because I think the ones who fulfill their oaths are all now quieted and are able to get rest finally and stuff like this. So I would presume that you have this pocket just outside the mountain who I suspect are going to be enemies in there, because they're probably part of the ruthless dead that just never made amends on it. Or maybe
I was asleep when Aragorn was here.
Yeah, I was asleep when Aragorn was here.
He swore the oath.
Oh, well, maybe when Elessar reaches that particular area in his tour of Gondor, maybe they can interact with them and Aragorn could give them a quest to redeem themselves.
I wonder if they'd consider turning the Paths of the Dead into a housing area.
Goodness gracious. Oh, that would be terrifying. But anyway, there are going to be 3 more of these. Each is Wednesday at 2:00. There will be another episode. The next episode is going to be Outer Gondor, which is the Anaflas, so the area that's northwest of Western Gondor, and that's an area that we haven't been to yet or anything like this. So this will be our first of our new areas that we're going to be visiting through here. So we'll be first going through there. Then the week after that, we'll be doing the Shield Isles. And then the week after the Shield Isles, we'll be going to the Cape of Umbar and to their capital city and seeing what's over there. So if you want to have a look at the lands that are upcoming, and then you can see the next 3 episodes of A Casual Stroll Through Middle-earth. And if you want to avoid spoilers as much as possible, then maybe put it on your watch later list or something like that. And that's it for the news this week. So let's go into the store sales. And Krister, do we have anything glorious on sale?
Well, it's only if you're a VIP. So with VIPs, they are still getting it's still raining gold Hobbit gifts through October 10th. You can forge your own ring. You can get 25% off.
That's not safe to do.
Forging your own ring? Oh, come on. It's fun. Everybody's doing it, fine. Only the coolest elves and dwarves and hobbits, not the coolest humans, but the coolest hobbits at least, forge their own rings.
Uh-huh.
But now, forging your own ring, this is even more of an incentive to do it, because you get 25% off crafting guild access, ingredient packs, crafting accelerators, rapid crafting, crafting tiers, recipe books. All of that is available through September 28th. And then the weekly coupon is for 5 free rejuvenation potions. And the coupon code is RESTORE, and that is RESTORE. and that is through September 28th as well.
Whee!
Yeehaw! That's why I'm reading a rejuvenation potion right now.
Let's go and head into our week in LOTRO. Krister, what were you up to?
Well, we managed to assemble a fellowship last night, and we strode into the lair of vermin and fought the vermin, and we won, which was quite awesome. So we were flush with victory. We decided, okay, you know what? We had our misfire when we did our tier 10 delving before, so we tried our tier 10 delving this time, which was hysterical because when we started it, nothing felt like it changed. So it's like, uh-oh, did we have another thing where it's telling us it's tier 10, but it's really not. But then when we started fighting those guys, I want to say, and I think I'm being extremely conservative here, that we might have had 60 to 70 deaths during this run. we were dying in layers. Archaeologists will have a field day when they hit the sediment layers of this tube, where we were adventuring, because oh my goodness. So yeah, we died over. It was just, ultimately it was just about the puddles. The puddles were just instant death if you ran them, and but we managed to power through the whole thing, got through it, and so that was a lot of fun. We were enjoying that quite a bit, and we were talking, of course, about the Mariner class. And talking about the interactions, because of course when we were talking about the DPS stuff, like we discussed today, the excitement was always like, well, if the Mariner can do this and the captain can do this, can they stack it? So we can't stack it, and we can't like fire it off one right after the other. But it's only 45 seconds. If it's just 45 seconds that those things can't be cast, that's not too bad. So that still means you think that both a DPS captain and a DPS Mariner would be a good complement for a group. I'm curious to see. I'm just kind of curious to see how the Mariner's going to play out in how they inhabit a role. You know.
Oh, you mean which role they're going to fulfill?
Yeah, are they going to be useful? You know, because the RKs, were a newer class, but they've kind of really they kind of came into their own with being DPS and healing. You know, they had a good fit there. I don't know what the current status of it. I think the RKs are still okay. It's hard to know with everything that's been nerfed, you know.
Well, RKs are usually DPS or healing is all the things that I always hear about RKs. And seeing how I've been playing an RK for the last few weeks, I'm hoping I have some idea
but basically the RK feels, between like taking a look at the RK, Bjorny, the Warden, that the RK seems to be the one that fit into fellowship and raid groups the best. Or, it almost feels like you have to have an RK along in a lot of instances, So I'm looking forward to seeing how that interaction plays out and what Mariners ultimately gravitate towards as well. So just looking forward to basically playing with them. And then outside of LOTRO, I played Starfield and I finished the main story quest. And now that I've played the game through with all the constraints, I was a Boy Scout. I didn't do anything wrong. Now that I've finished the storyline, it's time to cheat. My favorite time.
In other words, you're going to mod it like crazy?
Well, I'm gonna put some mods in, and then of course the one thing that always kills me. This was with Fallout 4 as well. Was I just was always on the absolute brink of poverty at all times. It was just I never had enough money. You finally find something you really liked, you spend all your money on it, and then you had nothing. You had to build everything up from nothing again. So, yeah, I just I gave myself $1 million. I wish you could do that. That would be so nice to do that in real life. I'll just give myself $1 million today, and but anyways, Starfield has been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it, and then I have this week I have continued my Blender boot camp and continuing to figure out and master that program. So I've been having a lot of fun with that too. What have you been up to?
Right. I'll begin with my RuneKeeper. where I joined Friday Night Fights, and we started out with doing a few skirmishes. So we ran the, let's see, we started out with Thevrian. Actually, I'm trying to remember which one. See, oh, we did Way of Smiths. Then one problem is that I had also done the field trip just before that, so I'm starting to get the. We did several skirmishes. Let's just put it that way. Because I try to think, okay, which ones did we do in that one? Which one did we do in that one? So after we ran those skirmishes, then a couple of people had to drop out, so we were left with 3. So at that point, we decided to run the Violet Apothecary. As I had never run the Violet Apothecary in 3-player mode before.
How was that, anyways?
Well, let's just say it did not in any way disprove my hypothesis that the current solo mode for Violet Apothecary is identical to that of the 3-player mode. It was certainly a lot easier going through with 3 than it was with going with 1. My hypothesis is that except for a couple of mobs, such as because there's a set of goblins which are greenies in solo mode instead of that, but those were the only mobs I noticed where the morale of the mob in solo was lower than that of the 3-player mode. And I've not been able to figure out what the difference is between solo and 3. Now the duo, the morales are 2/3 of those of the 3-player mode. So there's a debuff on them that reduces the power of the enemy. Yeah, that reduces the power of the enemies, and they have this debuff on it. So in fact, that means whenever I wanted to do a solo, I found it was easier to do the duo version than it was to do the solo version, because the solo version felt like it was the same as the small fellowship version, but the duo was actually designed so that it was more favorable for 2 people doing it. So yes, that hypothesis was in no way whatsoever squished by us doing the 3-player mode, because it felt like that we were just going through. Now the boss fight was a bit tricky, and my morale started going down a little bit on during the boss fight. But that's the only time we were in any sort of danger at all, and we still went through the whole thing without anyone dying, I believe. Because I don't recall seeing any time where anyone actually had to be knocked back to the beginning or anything like that.
Show off.
Yeah. So that worked out pretty well. Now this was, I think, the first time where I was seriously doing any healing, though throughout most of it didn't need all that much healing. But during the boss fights, I did need to do some healing on the matter, and that helped. And I was starting to get an idea of how a Runekeeper heals. Now, the problem I had with healing is because I haven't been taking all that much healing with this character, my runestone that I have for healing, my healing runestone was, let's just say, it's way behind my main runestone in there. I think that's probably the best way of putting it in there, is that I think I still had 2 of my traceries that were not that were below tier 13, which meant that they were turned off completely when I was in there. So in fact, I did upgrade them after it. So now I finally have all tier 14 traceries on my healing stone now, so that's good. Now I still need to get their levels up on them, because they still have been, because I've been putting all of my effort into my damage ones, because I'm spending most of my time in DPS mode rather than healing mode. So yes, I had my first experience in trying to heal with a rune keeper there. After we did the Vile Apothecary, then we went into the Poison Gardens. And the Poison Gardens was, of course, the usual nightmare that Poison Gardens is. Those haulers are a real pain. And well, the haulers, I think, were the only ones that really gave us serious trouble because, well, they do things like throw you into the middle of another mob pack or something like that. So the usual trouble that you have in those things. So we went through there, we got through there to the end, and I think that boss fight might have been a little bit easier than the one for the Vile Apothecary. But we got through it in there, and I did have some challenges to my healing on trying to keep everyone from dying on there, so we all had everything all work out of that.
And then how about your power? I mean, how good have you been noticing power problems, or has it been pretty manageable?
I don't recall any. I think there was one time where I had power problems, but I have a feeling that I had a sapping poison pot on me or something like that on me at the time, so I'm not completely sure if that was an isolated case or whatever, because it looked like the power just went down quickly rather than just being a gradual thing of use or anything like that. But I don't recall any regular type of power situation, meaning that I used so much power that I didn't have a chance to do anything or anything like that.
That's good, though. That's good. That would be ideal anyways. So.
Yeah. So this was my first time then attempting to heal with that character, or at least seriously trying to heal with that character. So we'll see if I ever learn how to properly heal with a rune keeper. It's one of the problems is it's hard to tell when you have a rune keeper exactly when you want to start healing and how effective it is because everything just about is a hot. So you do a little this, a little this, a little this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, are they going up at the proper rate that I'm expecting? And all that stuff. It's hard to tell. I'm still not used to it because I'm more used to the minstrel type of healing, and even then, I haven't healed all that much with the minstrel either.
Yeah, the captain. I think the captain and Archie are kind of similar to that. You're just establishing like a constant flow, and then you have maybe one or two skills where you can do a spot heal if needed. But the idea is just to keep that river of healing going.
Anyway, today I did go back and reorder my skills to a more logical order because I had quickly switched over, and my skills were scattered all over the place. And I didn't want to spend half an hour last night having people wait for me to get my skills into the right positions. So now I have them in the right position, so I'm hoping that the next time I'm needed to heal, I will be able to switch quickly, put in my click to the proper runestone, and then be ready to go. And my lore master found some spiders whose venom need not be fatal. I've always found that line by that elf is the most underwhelming confidence giver in the history of LOTRO. In small quantities, the venom from these spiders need not be fatal. Even when you're half the size of everybody else. Yes. And then my captain learned the story of the Rings of Power where I was visiting Cascalebrin and hearing what happened there with a little visit from the giver of gifts, shall we say. And that concludes my week in LOTRO. We currently have 13 supporters on Patreon, and if you'd like to join this illustrious rate of players, then help support LOTRO players. You can go to the nation's page to support the players alas on Patreon. Your money will be used for podcast hosting, website hosting, and to pay for our live shows. If you'd like to send us an email, you can send it to podcast@LOTROplayers.com. The Players Alliance has 2 shows on Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We have LOTRO Players News, and DDO Players News records when Drac is available. And that's all for tonight. Then this is Pineleaf Needles reminding you to skirmish responsibly.